I'm very excited to tell this case tonight, babe. I'm excited for you and everyone to listen.
For this case?
Yes.
Well, before you start, I'm going to remind everybody of where they can listen to us, because apparently it's a lot broader than I originally thought. So, other than YouTube, we are apparently on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Pandora.
Why are you making it sound like a question?
And Stitcher, because you have commas in between everything. You can also send any suggestions or questions to qualitytimewithtruecrime@gmail or yahoo.com.
Yes, I did that voice to text on my phone. That's why there's commas.
Okay.
Anyway, you guys can hear a couple of bloopers because he's probably not going to edit any of this out. But
Nope.
but he and I really struggle with the introduction.
Raw and uncut.
We really struggle with our introduction. It just seems so awkward. But anyway, I'm going to get into it because we don't like banter. You don't like banter.
You'll love the bloopers reel.
But anywho, so he gave the announcement. Hi, hello, pleasantries. Let's get right into the episode. I do want to give a trigger warning for sexual assault against minors and adults. Also, trigger warning for domestic violence. I will not go into any detail about the triggers, but they're definitely going to be in this story. Tonight, we will be discussing a real piece of work by the name of Ken Rex McElroy. I will refer to him as Ken because, frankly, McElroy, it's so hard to say. I struggle. So I'm going to call him Ken the entire episode. Among other things, he was a rapist. He was a stalker. He was an intimidator. He was a thief. And basically, he was just a downright bully. He bullied the entire town of Skidmore, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half north of Kansas City, Missouri. And they were truly terrified of him.
The whole town?
Well, when I tell you that the whole town, it's a tiny town. Skidmore has 300 people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's smaller than where we live.
My mom's side of the family has 300 people. And now I just actually looked it up and the consensus said it has 245.
Okay, so people are getting out of there.
They're not hanging out in Skidmore. It's a rundown town. It's rundown in the time I'm even telling the story. It's just a very rundown, tiny town. I'm going to start the story on July 8th, 1980. One of the owners of the B&B grocery store was Ernest Bowenkamp, and he was working in his store after hours waiting for a repairman to come and fix an AC unit that had quit working earlier that day. While he was cutting down some cardboard boxes by the back door, Ken showed up with a shotgun in hand. Ken and Bo had a very brief conversation before Ken raised the shotgun. Bo turned to flee, obviously to run away, but before he could reach safety, Ken pulled the trigger and shot Bo in the neck and in the torso. It was his 70th birthday. It was Bo's birthday. That Ken shot him with a shotgun. Now, when I tell this story about Ken, spoiler alert, he shoots people. Ken shooting people, it is always with a shotgun.
I'm assuming we're going to find out why he decided to.
It's so interesting that you said that because my next paragraph literally says, Ken shooting Bo wasn't much of a surprise to the town of Skidmore. After all, Ken was the town bully. But why was he the town bully? Why did he shoot Bo? How did we get to this point?
Wait, so you said they're not surprised. Like, he shot the guy, and they were like, huh, that's Ken.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
There's so much to this case, but
That rapscallion.
to answer those questions, I think we should probably start at the beginning.
All right.
Kenneth Rex McElroy was born in 1934, and he had a plethora of siblings. There was like 16 of them. Okay? He grew up very, very poor and hardly ever attended school.
Anybody would with that many kids.
Well, think about it. They're in rural Missouri, so you're in what, the mid-state,
Half
Midwest.
the population is in their house.
Yeah. Half of the population of the town is in their house.
Yeah.
But this is right after the Great Depression. They were like migrant farmers.
Okay.
They're not making money.
Yeah.
His dad seemed like a POS. He seemed to bully Ken, so he's not my favorite. But apparently his mom was really nice. Ken finally dropped out of 8th grade because homeboy never went to school. And the other kids could not care because he was a bully. He was just literally a bully his entire life. He was also known to be a thief when he was a minor, which will follow him heavily into adulthood. He did coon hunt as a kid and adult. I guess he bred, owned, and sold coon hounds, but he hunted raccoons. That was a huge pastime of his.
Okay.
The only good thing I ever read about Ken was that he loved animals and he was genuinely nice to them. Now, I understand that hunting animals, i.e. raccoons, is probably not nice. But from what I heard, he didn't abuse his dogs. He actually cared and took care of his dogs. In 1952, 18-year-old Ken married his first wife, 16-year-old Oleta, and they moved to Colorado for family and work. There was family there and he worked there. They moved back to Missouri between 1955 and 1956 after Ken had a work-related accident, and this is where his infamous stealing career starts as an adult. He would steal hogs and calves. So he would basically in the middle of the night, in the daytime, during the day, he would go and check out areas, right? See where certain cows are or
Scoping them out.
Scoping out the area, correct. Then later that night, he would drive there and he would grab a calf or whatever livestock he could get. And then he would go to another farmer and then sell that livestock for $50 to $60 a pop. So this is a lot how he made his money, was going and stealing other livestock and then giving them to other farmers.
Right.
His reputation is now growing in the counties, not only because of the theft of the livestock, but because he's being accused of raping minors. People heard rumors of these accusations, and they questioned why no one was looking into the rape accusations and why no one was looking into the thefts, but no one ever seemed to do anything about it. So you have two neighbors talking to each other. Oh, well, I heard, Ken did this or Ken did that. But no one ever went to the authorities or no one ever questioned Ken about it. You'll see very few times people actually stand up to Ken. It always seemed like it was someone else's problem or, I don't want to get involved. Those kind of people. Even though Ken was married, he had relationships, and I'm doing air quotes, relationships with minors. I understand that you cannot have a legal relationship with a minor, depending on, the state and things like that. I understand that. Some of these relationships, to an extent, were consensual. So to differentiate when they weren't consensual to when they were consensual, I'm just going to say relationships just so you can, everyone listening can understand the difference. Mm-hmm. So, but please understand that Marcus and I are well aware you cannot have a relationship with a minor unless your state allows that. These were not minors that were allowed to be in a relationship. He was quoted to say, "I like my women young and tender. I like young meat." He's a scumbag. I know I said Tyler Hadley was. I know I said Richard Bailey was. This guy's a scumbag. He truly is a scumbag.
Most of the people on this podcast are probably going to be scumbags.
But it's just the more I read about people, I'm just wow, he's even more of a scumbag than the last person we read about. Anyway, this quote was in a book I used for my research. The book was called In Broad Daylight by Harry McLean. And it has so much information. There's so much stuff that's going to be missing from this podcast that's in the book. It's so good. This podcast would have been 5 hours long if I would have written it based, with all the information from the book. His victims were usually between 13 and 16. One girl was named Donna and she was 13. She would actually sneak out of her house to see Ken, who I'd say is about in his mid-20s at this point. When Donna was 14 or 15, she actually had a son with Ken. Around 1956 to 1958, Ken began a, air quote, relationship with a 15-year-old named Sharon. She was from a poor family, which I'll be honest with you, basically every single person in the story is from a poor family. But she was from a poor family and admired Ken because of his reputation. So she didn't come from the best home. Basically, Ken would pay attention to her. It's a sad story, but, he paid attention to her. So in 1958, he ended up getting into an argument with Sharon and he shot her with a shotgun in the chin. Whether or not it was an accident, because of course he said it was an accident. He said the gun just discharged. She did survive, and Ken ended up divorcing his current wife to marry Sharon so he could avoid prosecution. I know, yep. Ken and his first wife had no children, but they did experience a miscarriage. So he shoots her in the face. He doesn't want to go to jail. He decides to marry her so that she won't press charges on him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She's a child. Where are her parents? Just gonna leave that there. In 1959, Sharon gave Ken his second son, who they named Jerome. The family moved to Skidmore, Missouri, which is where most of our story is going to take place. And they lived with Ken's parents. Ken was gone all the time. He's out cheating on her. He's out sexually assaulting minors and other women. And he's stealing. He's thieving. Like, he's just being, a piece of poo. Sharon is basically raising this child on her own. And his sister Helen, Ken's sister Helen, ends up coming and taking Jerome and bringing him to California since Jerome's not being raised correctly. So, poor Sharon, she has nobody. All she has is Ken, who is not a good person, and she ends up losing her child. She does end up having a second child, though, in 1961, named Tammy Sue. Sharon tries to get out of this situation multiple times, but she always goes back. The problem is that Ken viciously beats his wives or girlfriends or whoever. He is merciless. During one getaway, she ended up fleeing to the sheriff's office with Tammy Sue after being locked in her house by Ken and left there for 2 days. She explained to the deputies about the horrible beatings she endured, and she was terrified he would find out that she escaped. They arranged for her and Tammy Sue to stay with a foster family. The foster mom actually found out afterwards that from social services that Ken brought a 14-year-old home named Sally to live with them, and Sharon wasn't happy about that arrangement. I did read in a few places that Sally was forced to go with Ken because Ken threatened to beat Sally and murder her father. So Sally went basically, I guess, to save her father's life. He would abuse them both physically and sexually together, like at the same time. Ken found out where Sharon was after about 6 weeks and went to the foster house, coaxed her back with the promise of bringing home Jerome from California.
Yeah.
So he finds out she's in this foster home. He goes to the foster home. He tries to coax her out. He succeeds. He brings her home. She doesn't get Jerome back, and he beats the living daylights out of her. Now, obviously I've stated this multiple times now, Sally and Sharon, they're getting brutalized, but they're still bearing his children, okay? He does whatever he wants with whomever he wants. No one tells him what to do, and basically nobody fears this man. He did whatever he wanted with whomever he wanted. No one told him what to do, and he basically feared no one. He had these girls, and many girls after them, either fueled by fear or with his no one messes with me reputation, or even though he was horrible to them, they kind of confused his minuscule amount of attention for love. Because these are girls, they don't have a good relationship with their dad. They don't know how to be treated correctly. So Ken, who does put a roof over their head, does buy them food, and he was actually said to be a really good dad. Like, he actually took care of his children. But he was horrible to women. He was very sexist. Women had no place but to bear children and do what they were told. That's absolutely how he felt. He was also a heavy drinker, so that did contribute to his crappy behavior, unfortunately, just because when he did drink, it turned him into a different person. He wasn't very nice. Sally ended up having 3 children by him, who she would wind up losing custody later of, and Sharon has 5 kids by him. While Sally and Sharon were at home, because they lived together, let me point that out. These people lived in a house together.
Yeah.
When Sally and Sharon were at home, they were expected to do as they were told, and Ken's out making friends and thieving and scheming. He's ended up starting this, federation? No, that's not the right word. What's he doing?
Like coalition, cult,
yeah, I guess.
Group, gang.
Yeah. So while Sally and Sharon are at home doing what they're supposed to do, Ken is basically, he goes out and makes friends with young teens, males and females, and he has them start doing some of his bidding for him, where to go, rob people. Because this man stole everything. Okay? And he would sleep with young women. I say young women, I mean girls. He would sleep with young girls And then they would either go to livestock shows and sell his livestock for him, like stolen livestock, basically things like that. Once Sally's dad died, Ken basically had nothing to hold her there. And I'll be honest, I think he was willing to just get rid of her because she was kind of getting old, as gross as that is. And he didn't want the hassle of her being around anymore. But he does end up finding another girlfriend, and we'll discuss that. So Sally ends up being able to leave, okay? Sally's like, I want to go. My dad's gone. Toodaloo, I'm leaving. So she does.
Doesn't she have kids?
Yes, she has 3 kids. But she ends up losing custody of all of her kids. Not to Ken. She loses them. I'll get to that right now. She ended up losing custody of her children, as I previously stated, and she struggled with alcoholism her entire life. We don't really hear anything about Sally or her children anymore, but I do want to state that the 3 children went to the foster care home that the 3 children went to is the one that Sharon originally went to when she tried to escape Ken. So the foster family ended up falling in love with the 3 kids. They fostered them, and then they were adopted out. So now Sally's gone. We still have Sharon. According to the book, by the mid-60s, Ken was well known across half a dozen counties for the thieving, his behavior, and his bullying. His reputation was well known to law enforcement too. Law enforcement also thought that he was running a theft ring of stolen grain from elevators and expensive chemicals from farmers' supply stores in about 3 states. So he's running like a huge operation of theft and stealing. And this is like almost his only source of income. He never basically had a regular job ever he didn't even have a social security number. How crazy is that? Anyhow, I don't think he had a birth certificate either. Anyway, so they think he's stealing obviously the livestock, everything else I just said. The problem was proving it. No one seemed to talk or see anything when Ken was around. So Ken could steal something right in front of you, and you're going to tell someone you were at the gas station 7 miles away. Nobody said anything negative because they knew what kind of guy he was. I mean, if he's out hurting women and he steals stuff now, he'll just steal stuff in broad daylight. He doesn't care. Nobody stepped to him. He was known to carry a shotgun wherever he went and was already known to sexually assault teens and women and physically assault men. It was said he was investigated many times for the theft of the livestock, but nothing ever stuck. One man tried to press charges against Ken for livestock theft, but he quickly recanted when a rifle butt connected with his face. Ken was a huge intimidator. If someone wanted to be a witness against him, he was going to drag you to the ground.
Like, I'm trying to get a visual here of this guy. Like, is he a big guy? Is he tall? Is he, like, how old is he at this time?
I've been waiting for you to ask this so I could tell you that he had mutton chops.
Okay. I mean, I'm the right size guy. He
looked like a Wish version of Elvis. He dyed his hair jet black. He had the craziest mutton chops. He had like a beer belly, like he was a big guy. Now, this is interesting. And this is the interesting thing about illusions that you make with your brain. If you ask anyone who knew or knows Ken from back then, they would have told you he was 6'3", 6'4", massive guy. I think they ended up finding out he was actually 5'10" or 5'9". But that's the stature he carried. People just thought it's just the way he was.
Sounds like he kind of carried himself as like a wannabe mafia kind of guy.
Yeah. He's an interesting little fellow. So now in these days, I put this part in because I was wondering if we had anyone on the podcast that own livestock and stuff. And you're probably like, how is he stealing all this livestock? You know, you brand your animals. In these days in Missouri, you were not required to brand your livestock. You have to remember, this is a tiny town. So unless you had pictures of birthmarks or you knew your animals, you never would have known that was actually your cow. Because again, he's stealing these cows from people that have 300-400 cows. You have 2 or 3 missing. It might take a little while for you to figure it out. So that's why he was able to get away with this for so long, or the fact that no one had proof because there was no markings or branding at this time. Plus, it's a tiny town. People didn't expect to be burglarized or robbed. Yeah. And when they were, I guess you just kind of kept your head down and moved on. You had a family to raise. You didn't want to, kick up a ruckus. Now, we meet Alice Wood. Alice is 15 and Ken is 26 when they meet. In 1964, when she was about 17 to 19, Ken dipped on his wife Sharon and moved in with Alice. Sharon ended up taking her 4 daughters and moving to Florida to be around Sharon's mom. We're only going to hear about Sharon one more time in this podcast after this. It is said that Alice truly loved Ken and idolized Ken. She didn't have the best home life before she met Ken, shocker. So she thought that Ken was a strong man, but he treated her exactly the same way that he treated Sally and Sharon.
Shocker.
Yep. He disappeared all the time. He beat her. If she was like, hey, what are you doing here? Or, hey, where are you? Where are you going? He would beat her. He sexually abused her. He cheated on her. There's this one story where she was in the bedroom packing up a suitcase. And instead of coming and asking her, like, hey, what are you doing? What's wrong? He just starts brutalizing her. And she was actually just like boxing up some clothes that didn't fit anymore. Like she was like, I don't know why she put him in a suitcase, because I'm assuming, you can't just go buy cardboard at the store at this point. But she was putting them in a suitcase and she was going to go donate them or throw them away because they didn't fit anymore. That's the type of person he was. Alice did have a miscarriage at some point, but they ended up having a son in 1968. This now brings the total to 10 children, I believe. She did try to leave him in 1969, but when she went to her parents' house, Ken threatened to come and get their son. So basically, the son's name was Juarez. And it's not that he cared about Alice. He's like, well, I want my son. That's my son. You can't take my son from me. Alice wanted to protect Juarez and her stepdad and mom. And so she wants to protect them. And she's trying to load a shotgun for protection. And she accidentally shoots herself. The amount of people that get shot in this story and survive blow my mind.
I mean, by shotguns...
By shotgun, correct. Because all I think of is when you think of a shotgun. You know what I mean? Like, you're obliterated.
Shredded.
That's all I think of. So she shoots herself. She survives. Now, later that night, Ken told Alice's stepdad that he was coming to get their son because now Alice is in the hospital, and he threatened to shoot anyone in his way. So this is how he is. Ken wants something, Ken's going to get it. And nobody's going to stop him. I don't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, Ken shoots the stepdad. Stepdad survives being shot with a shotgun.
What were shotgun shells made of back then?
Air, water. It blows my... I mean, don't get Marcus and I wrong. We are so thankful that these people are surviving. But when we hear about people being shot with a shotgun, I think he might have been shot in the leg.
It's got to be birdshot.
It's
got to be.
It blows. It's just so weird. I'm like, every time I'm reading something, someone's shot, and a plethora of people get shot in this story. I'm like, oh my God. So anywho, unfortunately, I'll give you a little spoiler. There is one person who is shot that doesn't make it. Anyhow, so again, long story short, Ken shot the stepdad, but he does survive. Of course, charges are pressed because he shot somebody, but the case gets delayed for months, which is kind of normal now. It's normal for cases not to be done within a year or two, but it gets delayed. The problem is that Ken is harassing the living daylights out of this man because he wants him to drop the charges. I'm assuming at this point, a lot of states, they can pick up charges. So like, let's say you and I get into a domestic violence dispute, which would never happen, but if it did, and say I was seriously injured, the state can choose to pick up those charges. Even though if I'm like, well, I don't want to press them, the state can pick up the charges. I'm assuming that wasn't a thing here. So he's trying to intimidate the witness, so the stepdad, so that he'll drop the charges. Mm-hmm. Ken ends up going into a local tavern that this stepdad is in. It is daytime, I'm assuming, or it closed to nighttime. There is people in here, and Ken goes in there and threatens him with a shotgun. He even shoots the floor, trying to intimidate this guy to not testify. Ken's arrested for basically felony tampering with a witness, but it later gets dropped to misdemeanor tampering with a witness. Go ahead and ask me why.
Why does that get lowered?
No idea. In the end, both cases get dropped. The assault, him shooting him the first time, and the tampering with a witness, both of them get dropped. Alice stays with Ken. She doesn't leave him. Because you have to understand, these women, Sharon, Alice, Sally, they are being They're victims. I don't care what anyone says. They are victims. They are in an abusive relationship. Some women just can't get out. And mind you, not only are they children, but they're also victims. And that's sad. Because, again, she has children with this man.
I was going to say,
he provides for her.
It's the children. I mean,
correct. Yeah, she just doesn't. She needs a good guy to come and take care of her. This is where I had written his description, but I already gave it to you with his mutton chop sideburns. Throughout the rest of the 60s and early 70s, he's doing all of his thieving and he cannot get caught. So this is why the town of Skidmore and surrounding towns like St. Joseph's or St. Joe's, they call it. This is why the town's getting frustrated, is because he's continuing to steal from these people. He's continuing to bully these people and nothing is being done about it. Again, it's a town of 300 people. You know, we're not talking about New York. It's very easy to bully, I guess 300 people.
Yeah. Half of them live in the house, remember.
Correct. Half of them are now his children. He even had warrants out for his arrest. So law enforcement there's a couple of good police officers. I'm not going to talk much about them. I don't want to say they're relevant to the story, but there are some cops that do want to get him. But they put out warrants for his arrest, but they never execute them and he's never prosecuted. So they put out these warrants, but nothing ever happens with them. There is one story about him putting a 12-gauge shotgun in a police officer's face. Please ask me if he was arrested for it.
Well,
Shirley wasn't convicted.
With his track record,
right?
I'm going to assume not.
No. Over and over and over, they, as in the police officers that did care, they would try to find charges to press on him. Nothing ever stuck. Now, Alice would help him commit some of these crimes, and so did a girl named it's either Marcia or Marcia. I'm just going to go with Marcia. This is new girlfriend. So now we have Alice and Marcia are now the two new girlfriends. We are now introducing another girl.
Aside from Alice and Marcia.
Correct. Marcia doesn't stay around for long.
Okay.
We don't know much about Marcia.
Marcia.
I was just going to say that. Trina McLeod was 12.
Jeez.
Shocker, she's poor. Because that's all he victimizes is he would never go after elite people, ever. He would only go after vulnerable people. She ends up becoming, obviously, a victim of Ken's, and in my opinion, she's one of the worst victims. He was pushing middle age at this point and was already peddling the two other women. Mind you, all these women are living together. He would pick Trina up in the morning at a bus stop where adults and parents could see, then would drop her back off later in the day so she could catch the bus home. He would take her at first he was taking her to buy candy and ice cream and taking her for a ride in his nice car. And then he ended up, a couple times later, he would bring her to a motel. And grown men would watch him walk into this motel with this child. In 1971 or 72, at 14, Trina became pregnant, dropped out of school, and she moved in with Ken and Alice. Marcia was kicked out, mostly likely to probably make room for Trina. Because again, these houses are as big as like 2 bathrooms. These are tiny houses. Again, same behavior. Both of them are beat and sexually assaulted. 2 weeks after the baby was born, Trina and Alice tried to get out again. It was June 11th, 1972, and Trina's baby was still in the hospital, and Alice now has 2 children. So we have Trina just had a baby, and now Alice has 2 children, but Trina's baby's in the hospital. They fled to Trina's family's home, but Ken ends up finding them. After a standoff, he coaxes Trina and Alice, so now Trina, Alice, and the 2 kids, via a shotgun to their faces, and he's like, time to go. So Trina's worried about her family, so she's like, okay, we'll go with you, we'll go. So they leave with him, and he beats Alice so bad that night that she has to go to the hospital. He sexually assaulted Trina the next morning, June 12th, while holding a shotgun, and this was 16 days after she gave birth. He then goes to Trina's family's house, burns their house to the ground, and he shoots and kills their dog. All because they tried to help Trina. So I did say earlier that he was nice to dogs. I'm going to semi-retract that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about that part. He was nice to other dogs. A couple of days after the sexual assault, Trina had to take the baby in for like an infant checkup. And the doctor notified authorities about some things that Trina had told them. So I want to point out, Trina's parents didn't go to law enforcement. Law enforcement didn't come after a fire to a house. It ended up being a doctor, I believe it was obviously it was a pediatrician, that ended up bringing this to someone's attention. The baby was placed in foster care, and Trina went to a mental hospital solely for a safe place. So I want to emphasize that she did not go to the mental hospital because they thought she had mental issues. You have to understand, this is a town of 300 people. They have nowhere to put her. There's no, I guess they were waiting to basically put her in a foster care home. But at that time, they had nowhere safe to put her. So the safest place they had was the local mental hospital.
Small town police department doesn't have safe houses and
Correct.
stuff just sitting around.
Correct. So she does not receive any counseling, nothing like that. So she truly just went there. I think she ends up staying for one night or a couple nights. She ended up being placed with a foster family in another city. She was told nothing about the baby, and she left without seeing the baby. 3 charges were filed on June 19th, 1973 against Ken. Flourishing a deadly weapon, sexual assault, and arson, because they did get him on the sexual assault for the June 12th incident. Another charge was later added for assault. So I think that was, I don't remember what that was for, but I know there was 4 charges. So there was assault for another charge of assault for something, and that equals 4 felonies, okay?
Mm-hmm.
After a few weeks, he tracked down Trina, and she was terrified. He stalked her and harassed her via in-person and via phone calls, okay? So this is a massive crime, and he terrorizes this family. And he ends up finding out that they have a daughter. And he makes a comment to the foster mom, I know where your daughter goes to school. You want to trade girl for girl? February 1974, they charged Ken with 8 more sexual assault charges on a minor against Trina. So remember, I told you about the motel. So now I think it was the motel keeper or clerk, whatever you want to call him. He's telling them that this happened, that they know that he came and she was underage. Later that year, Trina was taken from the foster home that she had been at for about 1.5 years, and she was doing great in this foster home. She had foster sisters. She loved her foster mom. But they assumed, the foster parents assumed that the court case was coming up, so they wanted to move her closer. Because again, they moved her out of town for her protection. She ends up going to her grandparents' house, and she hates it at her grandparents' house. Her being brainwashed, she calls Ken, and Ken comes and happily picks her up. He ends up divorcing Sharon. So mind you, Sharon and he are still married. He ends up divorcing Sharon so that he can marry Trina, so Trina cannot testify against him. I want to touch on this a little bit. There is a law that you don't have to testify against your spouse. But what people don't understand is you can testify if you want. So if I commit a crime and you either see me or I tell you about it, you can choose to testify against me. So a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, it's just, oh no, she's my wife. She can't talk. Yes, she can. Well, he's trying to make a trade. He says, I'll let you stay in the house and I'll be only with you if you drop these charges. And of course, this is what Trina wants. She wants Ken to be good to her, take care of her. He's the meanest and the baddest, and he's got mutton chops, like he's the cat's meow. So she marries him. Now, some of you are probably like, isn't she still underage? Yes. Does she need parental consent? Yes. Trina's mom signs off on this.
This is a special community right here.
Homeboy burnt her house to the ground. And she says, yes, you can marry my daughter. Now, I don't know if he forced her to do that under duress. Absolutely. I have no idea. But that's wild. Trina does not testify. And she says, and this part, I don't know why this makes me so mad, but she says that she made everything up because she was jealous. And the reason why that upsets me is because that's Ken gaslighting, as what we know now is gaslighting. You will tell everyone it's a lie, and you will tell them it's because you were jealous. Nothing goes bad on me. It's because you're a piece of crap, not me. And that just, for her being so young and putting that on her, and she carries that stigma for the rest of her life. But she tells that story for the rest of her life. Nope, I made it up because I was jealous. 11 of the 12 felonies were dropped, and the one that wasn't dropped, he was tried, and he was acquitted. 19 felony charges in 3 years. So I only covered a few of them, right? Like 4 or 5, whatever.
Yeah.
19 charges in 3 years, and all of them either ended up with an acquittal or they were dropped. Don't forget, Alice is still around. We still have Alice. He ends up kicking out Alice, as I said, after he promises that Trina will be the only one in the house.
Right.
Alice is like singing Skip to My Lou as she's out the front door. Alice is like, okay, bye. Talk to you later. So Alice leaves with her 2 children. She does have another baby with Ken, though, 11 months after Trina and Ken are married. But she's on her own. She's living in another apartment.
Yeah, she's fully okay with that.
Correct. Trina also has another child with Ken. I believe this is now 13 children. On July 27th, 1976, Romaine Henry, a farmer, was shot by Ken in the stomach. Ken thought that Henry possibly stole something from him. I couldn't find anywhere that went into detail about why he thought that Mr. Henry robbed him, right?
Or what it could have been.
What it could have been, nothing. For some reason, he believed, I think it had something to do with his pickup truck. I think Mr. Henry had a white pickup truck. Because again, you live in Missouri, in farm field. How many white trucks can there be, Ken? Right? Like, whatever. So I'm not sure of the exact reason. Henry was able to escape and he was rushed to the hospital where he survives.
These people are built different. Like, what?
Midwest people are no joke. Oh my God. I mean, the guy talks about Ken walking up to his truck, opening the door, and he's like, and I don't want to go into graphic detail. Basically, like, my stomach was gone. And he drives himself to his house, gets out of the car, and tells his son, I think I need to go to the hospital. Or I think you need to take me to the hospital. Homeboy lives.
Grab a roll of napkins.
I'm telling you, these people they're just built different. You're right. Ken was arrested, and while awaiting trial, again, he harassed the living daylights out of this man. Harassed him horribly. Case goes to trial. Ken's acquitted. And I'll tell you how he gets acquitted. Because his defense now, because his defense with the first guy that he shot, the stepdad, it was self-defense, right? Something happened. It was self-defense. I thought he was going to shoot me. Because again, everybody has guns.
But everybody is living through these...
I understand that. Which is fantastic. But that doesn't change the fact that...
Why are these people who are living through the shotgun blast not saying... No.
Oh, they are. They are. But you have to understand, it's he said, she said.
Right, and the guy with 19 felonies.
But you have to remember, he has never been convicted. So those are not on his record. You can't really see those. Because he hasn't been... You have to understand, this is the 70s. This is before you can just go and clickety-clack on your computer and pull up all his arrest records. You know what I mean? Granted, again, a town of 12 people. But when you don't have corroborating evidence... So as I was going to say, the first one he said that, it was self-defense. Nobody spoke against that except for him. There's no proof. This one, he gets acquitted because even though this guy, I wholeheartedly believe is telling the truth, Ken convinces other people to say that he was elsewhere. And these people do because either they fear him or they're friends with him, or the witnesses that there were, he just annihilated them. He just absolutely harassed them to death. They were scared. They wouldn't testify. I know. This story's so infuriating. I'm sorry. Prosecutors assumed that there was witness tampering, and they also assumed that there was some bribing of the jurors. Our little buddy, Cocky Ken, he starts joking about shooting Henry because now double jeopardy applies. Everyone knew he did it. They absolutely knew he did it, but no one would testify to that. So he's cool joking about it, and he has said, quote, I thought I had the bastard shot deep enough that he'd die before he got home. On April 25th, 1980, is the day that the Bowen camps, for the first time, find themselves in the crosshairs of Ken McElroy. So as I said to you in the beginning, on Bo's 70th birthday, Ken shoots him in the neck and in the torso. There was some misunderstanding with some of Ken's children. So again, he shot on July 8th. This is now April 25th. So this is, a couple months or a month or so ahead. His children come into the grocery store. And there's a conversation between the clerk, Evelyn, and between the McElroy children. And basically, the McElroy children felt that Evelyn was accusing them of stealing, quote, that they were raiding the store. And Evelyn said that was not the conversation at all. But the children go and get Ken. So now Ken comes down to the store, and he comes to the store with Trina. They both verbally assault the clerk and the owners, Bo and Lois. Then they harass them and stalk them for days after that. So instead of just letting it go, coming in, yelling at them, don't say this to my children, whatever. They end up driving by their house at night. They'll go sit outside their house at night, just drive by their store, sit outside their store. They just absolutely they'll call them, absolutely just harass these people.
Mm-hmm.
Ken actually went up to Lois and was like, hey, I'll pay you to fight my old lady. Absolutely horrible to these people. So they end up showing up one night, and the Bowen camps call law enforcement. Law enforcement does nothing, and the McElroys end up sitting outside their house that night for almost an hour. And then again, it continues for days. He harassed, he intimidated, he stalked. And I don't understand why, because I get it, they accused you, but he's no threat to you. Bowen camp was no threat to him. Granted, he was a large man. He was said to be like 6'9", but he's 70 years old. He's no threat. But of course, you mess with Ken and his reputation, and he's gonna come after you. Okay?
Yeah.
I absolutely hate this guy. So law enforcement doesn't help. The community doesn't help. But the community now is starting to realize even more that it's not just about theft and this and this. Like, he'll come after you over little things now. He also harassed their daughter. Like, he would follow their daughter Cheryl in a car, follow her to her house, just weird stuff. On May 29th, 1980, so this is about a month later, Ken shoots at the Bowen camp's house. Okay, so he goes with his shotgun and shoots at their house twice with his shotgun. He then comes back 30 minutes later and shoots at their house again. Mrs. Bowenkamp files a police report, but 2 days later, he comes back and shoots at their house again. Never arrested, never...
That's why he keeps doing it.
No, absolutely, because there's no repercussions. Are you insane? Why isn't this guy being arrested? So people are upset, people are scared, and the town is starting to realize, again, Ken is invincible. Like, someone stole from you. Okay, you shot that guy. Oh, you shot the other guy in self-defense. Yes, you steal, blah, blah, blah. But Bo's a good guy. And you're now just harassing him in town, because you have to understand, the thing is that McElroy really never came into town. And now all of a sudden he is starting to come in town. And now that's starting to bother people. Because Ken really kept his distance from Skidmore, the town part. Does that make sense?
Okay.
The town might be a street, but he didn't really mess with anyone on the main drag or whatever you want to say. We are now finally arriving back to July 8th, 1980, where we left off with Bo being shot. Despite being shot in the head and in the torso with a shotgun, Bo survives. Witnesses identify Ken as the shooter, and he is arrested. He does bond out the next morning, though. How? I don't. He just blew someone to smithereens, but he's allowed out. Ken, of course, claims self-defense, and even though he openly brags about it before and after. So he said, like, right before he went and shot Bo, oh, I'm going to go teach him a lesson, right? So he says he's going to go teach him a lesson, goes and shoots, oh, but it was self-defense. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then he does brag a little bit afterwards. Again, it takes time. The court takes time. He harasses these people again. He harasses every witness that said that they saw the shooting. He stalks them. He threatens their family. And this goes on for over a year. So now the town is pissed because you had upstanding citizens who saw him shoot Bo. They want to testify. Now he's going after their own. Mm-hmm. He even, I have a part in here that he even went after the police officer that arrested him that night. Like, he's even, I want to say it was the sheriff or one of the sheriff's deputies.
This guy's got a set on him.
Yeah. So again, here, I wrote this here. Even the state trooper who arrested Ken on the charges against Bo, he harassed, threatened. I mean, he's awful to these people. June 26, 1981, he was convicted on second-degree assault. First of all, the fact that it's only second-degree assault blows my mind, but I digress. He gets convicted of second-degree assault, and the recommendation sentence, 2 years. Ken's attorney asks if Ken can stay out on bond or on bail, whichever it was, while the lawyers work on the appeal, and the motion is granted.
Who's the judge?
What? Skidmore is terrified. They are to have said, we would rather have you acquitted him than say he's guilty, tell him he's going to jail for 2 years, and then let him go into our
Oh
town.
yeah, he's gonna raise hell in that time.
Absolutely. He's raising Cain. He is furious, and he's telling anyone that will listen, I'm not going back. I'm not going to jail. I'm sorry, not going back to jail. I'm not going to jail. Because he's never really been in jail. As far as I know, this is the only time he's ever been convicted up into the story.
Yeah.
And he's been arrested, like, I think it was, a total of 21 times? Insane. So, people are furious. On June 30th, he goes into a local bar, which is called the D&G Tavern. So, he goes into his local tavern with an M1 assault rifle. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what that is, but that's exactly how it was written, so... Mm-hmm. An M1 assault rifle equipped with a bayonet, and says he's going to, quote, finish off Beau, then carve him up like a turkey with the bayonet. Some patrons hear the threat. They report the threat. Finally, people are starting to actually step up, but they report the threat, and the court decides that they want to start a bond revocation. So they want to revoke his bond because threatening to cut someone up with your flipping bayonet is not in your bond agreement. Okay.
Oh, people got a problem with that.
Yeah. Apparently that's where they draw the line.
Okay.
Right. Like we can, rape little girls and everybody, but wanting to assault someone with your bayonet is that's top tier. Anyway, there was a scheduled hearing, and of course, Ken did what he normally did. He threatened all the witnesses, harassed all the witnesses, everything he does, intimidates them, whatever. People are really starting to care because, again, when you have a town of 300 people and you've now threatened 150 of these people, that's starting to become an issue. These people are starting to they're not upset or scared anymore. They're mad. And they're pissed. They actually even tried to get him banned from the town of Skidmore. I don't know if they were young guys or young kids but these younger gentlemen tried to get him banned from Skidmore. They tried to sign a petition, and quite a few people, again, in a town of 300, how many can you have? But quite a few people signed this petition, but then, other people were like, that's illegal. You can't have someone banned from an entire town. So obviously they ex-nayed that. July 10th, 1981. That was supposed to be the day of the bond revocation hearing, but it was postponed, of course, because these people cannot catch a break. Earlier that morning, around 60 to 75 Skidmore citizens met up in the hopes of going to protest basically, they wanted to go there and say, we want him locked up. He threatens everybody. He's scaring everybody. He has shot multiple people. Please, keep him locked up. So there is no hearing, so they can't go. They heard that Ken was in town because, again, he's normally not ever in town. But they hear he's now in town, which I'm assuming is just one street. This is super funny. Apparently, he was in town having a redneck breakfast, which includes a beer, Camel cigarettes, and a couple of Rolaids.
Oh.
I was like, what? I read that on an article online. All right, back to the show. The town was tired of being scared, and they've had enough. The group that met up for the hearing decided to go and have a sit down with Ken. Okay. So they think they're going to walk into this bar, which is actually, I believe, was just a trailer turned into a bar. They want to go and just talk to him. Hey, listen, we've had enough. We're over it. Please stop. Some people stayed outside. Some people stayed inside because I'm assuming some people are yeah, he's going to shoot you in your forehead. So I don't want to go inside. Trina and Ken, whatever, they have their conversation. They end up leaving. And Ken buys a six-pack. So he's carrying his little six-pack out to the car. Now, Trina doesn't feel comfortable. She feels like something's awry. And Ken's as cool as a cucumber, as he always is. He gets his little six-pack and they head outside to their Silverado. People followed them out of the bar. Again, Ken's unfazed. Trina's scared for whatever reason. I think that Trina
saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I think she knew. Even though
yeah.
She had to know these people were angry and they were upset. So they get into their truck, but Ken doesn't leave right away. Because again, he's too cool for school, okay? So he knows these people are mad and he knows these people want to talk. So, but no one has basically the balls to talk to him. No one wants to be the first to come up and say, stop. You know what I mean? So he gives them their chance to say what they want to say, okay? I personally think he was secretly hoping that someone would try him so he could take out his anger because he's pissed. He knows he's going to jail and he's pissed. So he's waiting for someone to side eye, as TikTok says. Anyhow, he opens a new pack of Camels and he puts the cigarette between his lips. He does all of this so slowly and in a very, very taunting way, right? Boom! Boom! 2 gunshots from the left and 4 more from the rear rock Ken's truck. Ken is shot and killed. While witnesses and citizens are trying to get Trina out of the truck, she's covered in blood. So, peoples, they shot Ken. They did not try to. I truly believe in my heart they didn't want to shoot Trina and they didn't want anything bad to happen to Trina. Again, let me read this part to you so I can get to the explaining. They succeeded in getting her out without her being injured. Ken was killed with at least one .22 caliber slug and another one from an 8mm rifle, according to the book that I read. There were reports that there was anywhere between 12 to 100 people standing outside of the bar that day.
Hold on. You can't say 12 to 100. That is such a
When I tell you, it is so broad. I watched and read so many articles. Some say 12, some say 20, some say 30. His son said, there was up to 100 people outside. It's just whoever you get the story from. Okay? The point is that there was an exuberant amount of people, regardless. Okay, because again, tiny town. This isn't a parking lot. Okay, this is a very, very the size of like the area they were is probably as big as our house. Okay, not a very big area. Not we're not talking about a Walmart parking lot. It is reported to be anywhere between 12 and 100 people outside the bar that day, and everyone reports that they never saw a shooter. Nobody. Everyone claims that as soon as they heard the shots, they hit the ground and they never looked back up. They say that there's either between 1 shooter or 2 shooters or up to 5 shooters. Task forces from 6 different Missouri agencies were called in to help with the investigation and to press the witnesses. Nobody talked. Nobody.
Yeah, I mean, you saw how hard it was to get them to talk against Ken. You think they're going to talk once he's finally gone? Heck no.
Correct. These agencies begged, threatened, and pleaded. No one talked. They even set up a tip line. Not one witness called it. Only person who pointed the finger at a shooter was Trina. She said that a man named Del Clement killed Ken, but no one would back up her claim. Prosecution even tried to bring charges against Clement, but the grand jury declined.
Not enough evidence.
Not enough evidence. FBI even got involved, and there was a federal grand jury trial. Same outcome. Not enough evidence. In 1984, Ken's attorney sued for a wrongful death civil suit on behalf of Trina against the town of Skidmore, the sheriff, the mayor, and Del Clement. It was said that they settled out of court. I want to go back to a little bit about when the day of the shooting occurred. There was a meeting in town where a bunch of people went and they spoke. We don't know what they spoke about because no one that was truly there will fully say what was said. Mm-hmm. I believe that the people that were there that do say things about it is basically they were just trying to think of a way of what to do with Ken. Okay. They needed a new idea because trial wasn't going.
Nothing was working.
Nothing's working. Supposedly a group of men stayed behind. And I believe that they, with the sheriff, and again, I'm pretty sure that guy's still alive. So this is just my thought. Please don't sue me. I think the sheriff knew what was going down. I'm not sure if I knew the mayor knew, but I think they set him up. They absolutely set him up. And the attorney, Ken's attorney, and Trina believed that he was set up. So they believed he was set up with the sheriff, set up with the mayor, and then she thinks that Del Clement was at least one of the ones that pulled the trigger and killed him. They did settle out of court, but This case is now over 40 years old. This happened in 1981. Over 40 years later, no one still has been tried or convicted for McElroy's murder. I do want to say that even though Ken was not the nicest person, he was murdered and he did have a family. So even though I don't necessarily feel bad that Ken died, I do feel bad for his kids. Some of his kids, or as far as I know, all of his kids are still alive, and he does have grandchildren, and he was good to his children. And his kids do express that they feel that the town basically kind of bullied them, that they looked down on them, and Ken was standing up for himself and things like that. But I do just want to make sure that we note that Ken is a victim of homicide. His case is unsolved, and my heart does go out to his children, and Marcus's heart goes out to his children and his grandchildren. And I do want to say that I do know Trina left Skidmore afterwards because she was frightened. I mean, this poor girl was traumatized her entire life, and she truly believed that Skidmore was going to kill her and or kill her children. So they did leave. As far as I understand, and I read this on a website, I think from her granddaughter, so I hope I'm correct. She did get remarried. She found a great guy. I'm not sure if she had more children, but she did find her happily ever after. Unfortunately, Trina did die of cancer in 2012. That is our episode, you guys. Please let us know what you think. We appreciate you always. Thank you, and we love you.